What's up guys, this is D2 from Samurai Gamers, and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. First of all, I'm all by my lonesome, and second of all is I'm not going to be doing some sort of tier list explanation or patch preview or what have you. This is going to be a predictions piece for the Arena of Valor International Championship 2018. Now, if you didn't know, I did a whole ton of unofficial English broadcasts of both Thailand's RPL and Taiwan's GCS. So I'm very familiar with a lot of the teams in this tournament, 6 of them, well maybe 5.5 if you only include half of TDC, and I'll get to the reasons for that in a moment. But very familiar with those teams, obviously familiar with the Western scene as well, so I feel like I have a pretty good grasp. I'm less familiar with Vietnam, Indonesia, and some other teams in this, but I feel like I have a pretty good grasp overall, so we can go over that. By the way, if you want to check out those unofficial broadcasts, go over to youtube.com/D2HS or twitch.tv/D2HS, all spelled out, no numbers in there. Alright, so let's get to it. Before we start, we need to talk about the format. So, you see these teams are grouped up into 4 groups, A, B, C, and D. Don't worry about those acronyms, we'll get to them in a moment. But the important thing is that there's 16 teams split up into 4 groups. And taking a look at this format, this graphic was actually made before the groups were drawn from the previous slide, so don't worry about the teams not being there. But the important thing is that there's a knockout stage and there's a group stage, and that's a little bit confusing because the knockout stage kind of makes it seem like it's like the playoffs. Maybe it sounds like they should be flipped or something, but just think of it this way: the knockout stage is like group stage 1, and then the group stage is like group stage 2. So it's basically 2 group stages in this situation, and 12 teams are in group stage 1, and then another 12 teams are in group stage 2. Now, how do they choose those 12 teams? Well, let's take a look at this first slide once more. The teams at the bottom, the blue teams at the bottom, are in the first group stage. Now, the 8 teams that make it out of that first group stage move on to the second group stage and they're combined with the seeds, the teams in purple, that have already moved on to the second group stage. And they stay in the same groups from what I know. It seems strange, but yes, they stay in the same groups. So for instance, if you see in group A, if XD Gaming and TDC move on to the next stage, then they will be still in the same group with each other, XD Gaming, TDC, and then they will be joining Team Flash, as you can see there in group A. So that's how it works. Then from there, it gets a little bit confusing once more. If you get out of the second group stage, essentially, then you go on to the playoffs, which for the first round is single elimination, but once you move on to the second round, it's double elimination after that. So if you make it all the way there, if you make it past both group stages and past the first round, then you can lose once and still have the ability to make it to the grand finals if you're unlucky to lose in the semifinals. All right. Hopefully that's clear enough. Basically, for the purposes of this, there's 2 group stages, and the first group stage is called knockout stage, and the second group stage is called group stage. So let's move on. So before we go on, actually, let's talk about the hierarchy after the Arena Valor World Cup, which was the first international championship that involved basically all of the teams in the world that play the game. And that was in July of this year, this being 2018, if you're somehow watching this in some distant future. And it was really important to watch the AWC because not only did they play the actual tournament itself, but they had a lengthy boot camp before that where every single team basically played against each other. So every one of the teams played against each other. And at the end of it, we had a pretty good idea of where the country stood with respect to each other as far as strength is concerned. At least we knew the teams within those countries, how good they were. So let's start with Tier 1. We had Korea, aka AHQ now, used to be at the time Olympus. They won the tournament. They are the current champions. And then we had Thailand, who brought 2 teams, one of which finished in 2nd place, the other of which finished 5th through 8th. Then we had Taiwan, who had brought 2 teams as well, the first of which finished in 3rd place, the second of which finished 5th through 8th, and then we had China, who finished in 4th place. Now, people thought that China would be be contenders to win the tournament. Unfortunately, they finished in 4th. But the reason why is because they have King of Glory, which is basically the first version of Arena of Valor, and it's an extremely popular game in China. There's the KPL, which is worth hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, played all the time. And so they figured China's probably the best in the world. Unfortunately, China doesn't get to send its best teams because, again, they're busy with the KPL. Now, in Tier 2, I put Vietnam by itself. There's an argument to be made for North America to be there, and then Europe by itself in Tier 3. But Vietnam did beat North America in the boot camp portion, and they seem to be more competitive with the other regions overall, so kind of put them in their own tier there. Now, North America, there's an argument to be made that, again, like I mentioned, they're above Europe. They did beat Europe in the last day of the boot camp, which cemented their seed and allowed them to make it into 5th through 8th place, joining Vietnam and the rest of the teams there. Whereas Europe, they finished 9th through 12th, excuse me. But, you know, Europe wasn't able to send its best team because For the Dream went instead of a Team Noob, and also because, I mean, they're pretty close, right? And there wasn't a whole lot that separated them. The only difference between them was the match that they played against each other. They lost to all the same teams. They beat all the same teams. And so it seems pretty fine. Finally, Tier 4, Indonesia. Again, one of those things where Indonesia could be in Tier 3 because they did beat South America and the MSP team. But they did lose to both North America and Europe. So basically, among this, I would say it's generally in order, even within the tiers. Number 1, number 2, number 1 Korea, number 2 Thailand, number 3 Taiwan, number 4 China, and etc., etc., etc. But you can make a case that North America maybe tier 2.5, maybe Indonesia tier 3.5, but that's about it. These are pretty set tiers, especially post AWC. This is basically where the teams were. South America and Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines bringing up the rear. South America did defeat the MSP team, but that was the Philippines team. And that Philippines team actually had issues with their visa post boot camp. So the team at the boot camp was from the Philippines, but the team at the actual AWC was from Singapore. And that team ended up doing better at the AWC because they actually took a game off of Thailand's number 1 team, strangely enough, and they showed better games overall. So strangely enough, the team that didn't qualify but went because of visa issues ended up performing better. Now, again, this is right after the AWC, and teams have gotten better. Some have gotten worse. We'll talk about that in a moment, but this is a good place to start because this was the last time that we've seen all the teams actually play against each other. We haven't seen anything since then other than the PvP championship, but at that championship, the majority of the teams weren't sending their best teams, and the teams that won the championship in the end, that being Thailand and Taiwan, those weren't nearly the best teams in that region anyway. So let us move on. So Group A, for the knockout stage, remember this is the first group stage. This consists of XD Gaming, TDC, and Nova Esports. Now, also in Group A, technically, is Team Flash from Vietnam, but they are exempt from the knockout stage. So for the first group stage, basically the knockout stage, it's going to be these 3 teams going against each other. And let's start with XD Gaming from India. I didn't mention earlier that India wasn't able to participate in the AWC because they didn't have a game long enough at that time, but now they do. And let's talk about XD Gaming. They won the 2 Indian qualifiers that were presented to them. They qualified for the AIC and the PvP championships. And they were pretty substantial qualifiers in terms of the number of teams there. They had to get through at least 32 teams both times. Unfortunately, in the PvP championships, the first time that India has got to show itself against the rest of the world, they went 0-10. And their competition wasn't exactly all that fierce either, as the teams in their group were one from Malaysia, one from Singapore, one from Philippines, and 2 of those 3 teams didn't actually qualify from the MSP region. The other 2 teams were a lower level Thailand team and a lower level Indonesian team. So unfortunately, not the greatest competition, and they went 0-10 in these games, and this is the exact same team, so I feel like they're going to struggle. India, even though they've had the game for not so long, they have technically caught up to the rest of the world as far as heroes are concerned, because they have most of the latest heroes in their client. Strangely enough, though, they don't have Kali or Chagnar and one other hero I'm forgetting because of religious reasons. And that won't hold them back all that much, I suppose, but it's still a concern for them. But I think more of a concern than that is the fact that they've shown that they aren't on par yet with the rest of the world. So let's move on to Toyota Diamond Cobra, Thailand's #3 team. Now, this is a very interesting case because they finished 7th in the RPL out of 8 teams. So they did very, very poorly. And they did so poorly, in fact, that they were sent to the open qualifier. They weren't even in the main qualifier for the second Thailand qualifier for the AIC. However, they had a complete roster overhaul after the RPL. Only Mr. Suns and Summer are remaining from the roster that did so poorly in the RPL, and their roster changes worked really well for them. Not only did they steam through the open qualifier, once they got to the main qualifier, they defeated ITCD Bacon, and we'll talk about ITCD Bacon in a moment, but they were originally considered juggernauts in Thailand. Then they defeated Evo's Debut, who was another team in the RPL, and then they defeated RRQ, and RRQ nearly defeated Alpha Red. So RRQ was another team who was very surprisingly good in the qualifier, but regardless, TDC just blazed through all of them. They made it to the winners finals, where they eventually lost to Alpha Red 2-3, and Alpha Red themselves are a very formidable team, so losing in a tight match against them is very impressive as well. This is all to say that when I was casting those matches in the RPL along with the source, we were not impressed by them whatsoever, but they have made some roster changes and they are on fire as of late, so I would say that they are a very formidable team in this tournament, despite being Thailand's #3 team. Now, finally, we have Nova Esports from Europe. They went 14-6 in games in the Valor Series regular season. Then they went 5-1 in the Valor Series playoffs, taking out Bubble Team in the finals, 3-1. Now, Nova Esports is they've been the best team in Europe essentially for the entirety of Europe's competitive esports history in AOV. Up to this point, most of the roster was on Team Noob before Nova Esports combined a bunch of players together. And at the moment, I saw the match against Bubble Team. I saw their first round match as well. They seemed okay. They seemed to have pretty good drafts. They're playing reasonably well, but I do not think they're as good as Toyota Diamond Cobra at the moment. So I am predicting that Toyota Diamond Cobra will finish in first and Nova Esports will finish in second. And I do not believe India will get a game in this knockout stage, unfortunately. As far as TDC and Nova getting out of this group, I'm very, very confident. I am 99% confident that's going to happen. I am very certain that India is going to fall out. As we'll see later, I am not so confident in the other predictions that I'll be making, but this one I'm very confident that TDC and Nova will make it out of this group. All right, let's move on to Group B. And starting off, we have Tomago from Singapore. They did play in the 2018 AWC, like I mentioned earlier, after the team from Philippines, I believe it was Clutch Gaming, they were unfortunately denied visas. And in the Singapore national qualifiers and the MSP qualifiers for the AIC, they blazed through them, losing 1 game total. So they did really well. Unfortunately, at the PvP Championships, they lost to Resurgence from Malaysia twice. And that's interesting because they didn't play Resurgence in the MSP qualifiers because luckily for them, Maxbox defeated Resurgence for them, so they didn't have to play Resurgence. But they've lost to Resurgence twice, which is not a good sign for Tomago. That said, MSP has been getting better. I believe they're better than the showing that they showed at AWC earlier this year, because at that time they were missing a lot of heroes. Now they've mostly caught up, so they should be a lot better off. So let's move on to OMG from China. Now this is very interesting because the Chinese qualifiers, I was looking through the VODs and I realized they're playing on King of Glory. They were not playing. The qualifiers for Arena Valor International Championship was played on a different game for China, which again, very, very interesting. And this time it was a separate qualifier. It wasn't like the runner-up or some random, KPL tournament. They they played a separate qualifier altogether, and OMG won. It's a complete crapshoot. I am not sure what to expect from OMG. They are, if you don't know of Chinese esports in general, OMG is a respected organization. So they, they have roots in the area. So I'd expect them to be good just by the fact that it is an established esports organization and they're coming from China, and China, they kind of birthed the KOG/AOV esports scene. That said, I don't know the teams that they beat. I've never heard before. I don't know how well they're going to be able to transition from KOG to AOV. It's just kind of blind trust at this point that China's going to be good, and that's all I can say. Finally, we have Overclockers from Vietnam. They are Vietnam's third team. Now, I would say that Vietnam wasn't really awarded their three teams based on merit per se. It was more the fact that they are half of the teams, or half of the countries, excuse me, that are hosting the tournament. And no offense to Vietnam, but I feel like their number 2 and number 3 teams are not going to be as good as the secondary teams from Taiwan and Thailand per se. But that said, they did finish 23-11 in games in the Arena of Glory regular season, which put them in second place overall. But they ended up losing to Swing Phantom 3-1 in the semifinals, which dropped them to number 3. That did allow them to qualify. And yeah, they basically, all they had to do was, they basically qualified for the AIC by finishing in second in the AOG regular season, because it didn't matter who got up from the quarterfinals, because even if they lost in the semifinals, because they were already in the semifinals because of the gauntlet style system, they were going to make it in. So this is all to say that the qualification for Overclockers wasn't too strict. They made it in pretty easy peasy, I would say. All they had to do was finish either really high in the regular season or finish reasonably well in the playoffs, which they did. This is all wishy-washy because it's hard to tell how good they are. Even watching the games, it's hard to tell. Some teams can look better or worse depending how bad or good their opponents are. And this is all to say that they are very... It's hard to tell with this group. I would not be too surprised if Tamago made it out over Overclockers, but I think I'm just going to go with the history of the regions and say that Overclockers is likely to get out over Tamago. And I'm just going to put blind trust into Oh My God from China. I'm going to be predicting Oh My God gets out first, Overclockers gets out second. But again, unlike Group A, I have very little confidence because it's really hard to tell what's going to be coming out from Overclockers. It's like, well, it's hard to talk about, right? Because Vietnam is yay much better than, these other regions in the world, but then again, Overclockers is yay worse than these other teams from Vietnam, and it's really hard to tell. So again, would not be completely surprised if Tamago finished over Overclockers. I would be surprised if Oh My God didn't do well, because China's historically been good at esports in general. They'll figure something out. But yeah, this is all to say, this is do not bet on this if there's somehow betting sites out there taking your bets. Not a good idea. But my prediction, tentatively, is Oh My God and Overclockers making out of Group B. Let's move on. Alright, Group C, we have Flash Wolves, which is Taiwan's number 2 team. Now, they went 10-4 in the GTS regular season, losing to AHQ, which is actually a Korean team, in the semifinals 1-3. And Flash Wolves, I believe, is actually not one of Taiwan's 2 best teams. I believe that's SMG. Unfortunately for SMG, they finished behind Flash Wolves in the regular season. Despite winning their last 7 series, they just had a really, really slow start. And because Flash Wolves finished in second place, and because we had a gauntlet playoffs, that meant that once AHQ defeated SMG in the first round, then Flash Wolves was automatically in. So that's unfortunate if you're SMG fans. It's good if you're Flash Wolves. They're still a really good team. They can be pretty up and down. The thing that's scary about Flash Wolves, both for them and against them, is they're extremely good in team fights, but they can fall behind in macro terms. And if they fall too far behind, they could just lose the game. But generally, their style of play is to fall behind 1,000 or 2,000 gold and somehow just outplay the other team in team fight and win regardless, and then they snowball from there. And it's pretty terrifying to behold, but again, they do have a macro weakness. Moving on, we have Nova Esports from South America. They were 16-7 in games in the Valor Series regular season, and they didn't finish in the #1 spot, but they defeated Pain Gaming and DTwo Esports in the playoffs, which allowed them to qualify for the AIC, and their match against DTwo was pretty nuts. That's all said, I don't believe they're going to be finishing out of this group because a lot of South America's matches were very sloppy. As much progress as they made throughout the season, and as much as esports is pretty big in South America, we had over 100 teams try out for the Valor series. I still think that they are a little bit behind. That said, if they're going to be making out a group, they might be able to take out our final team here, that being Swing Phantom. Now, Swing Phantom was the team, was the Vietnam rep at AWC 2018, being the former defending champions of the AOG. But this time, they only finished in 3rd in the regular season. They, like we mentioned earlier, defeated Overclockers in the semifinals, and they had to defeat a different team in the first round in order to even get to this point. But then they ended up losing to Team Flash 3-1 in the finals. And Team Flash, as we'll see later, kind of dominated the entire AOG this season. So even though Swing Phantom, formerly Saigon Phantom, used to be the best team in Vietnam, looks like they've been overtaken by Team Flash at the very least. So despite their history, it's hard to see Nova Esports really overtaking Swing Phantom. Swing Phantom, they're very experienced. Even though they might not be the best team in the world, I feel like they have the experience and the skill to take out Nova Esports. That said, I don't think that Swing Phantom is going to take out Flash Wolves because they're just too good. So my prediction, Flash Wolves first, Swing Phantom second, and Nova Esports is going to be knocked out. This one, I am in between Group A and Group B in my confidence level. Let's move on to the last group. Okay, so starting with Saudar Esports and their punctuation slash capitalization of esports makes me want to puke, but we'll talk about that later. They are from Indonesia, and they went 4-2 in the Arena Valor Star League, which is Indonesia's really high prize pool league. It's like $170,000, something like that, which made them tied for second. They actually haven't had their playoffs yet, but the ASL isn't an AIC qualifier, strangely enough. I don't know why they didn't do that, but in a separate qualifier, they defeated EVO's AOV, which was Indonesia's rep at AIC 2017 and AWC 2018, so they upset that hierarchy. And then they defeated DTWP.ID, who was previously 6-0 in the ASL. So the two teams that you could argue were better than them, in a sense, at different stages of Indonesia's esports, AOV esports history, they beat both of them. And they actually defeated DTWP ID twice in that same tournament because there was double elimination. So, just going off those qualifiers, we'd say that Saudar Esports is, pretty obviously the best team in Indonesia. I'm not really holding my breath unless Indonesia got a lot better over this time period. They've had different heroes as well. They had Wiro before everyone else. They were missing on a few heroes. Garena Indonesia is kind of doing strange things as far as the hero releases are concerned. But I think they're okay. But I don't think that there's a huge difference between Saudara and what we saw at EVO's AOV earlier. Let's move on to Alpha Red, Thailand's #2 team. Now, Alpha Red is actually one of the probably one of the best teams in the entire knockout stage. They defeated ITC the Bacon, and here's where I give my eulogy to ITC the Bacon, as I put a list of their accomplishments in that parentheses there. They are the Throne of Glory 2017 champion, the ROV Major League 2017 champions, the RPL Season 1 champions. City Bacon, feels bad, man, you're not at the AIC. Now, if you go and look at their prize winnings in just a year and a half, they've won like $200,000 just from prize money, not to even go into, you know, their own streaming stuff. But rip ITT Bacon. Alpha Red took them out in the RPL semis. And unfortunately for Alpha Red, that did not qualify them for the AIC. They had to go out and prove themselves once more by winning the Thai main qualifier and defeating TDC 3-2 in the grand finals. They were actually in they were in trouble a little bit. They lost to RRQ earlier in the tournament, and then they nearly lost to RRQ in the lower bracket finals again. And they won that 3-2 barely. So Alpha Red barely made it here in the end, but they did manage to snag that second seed. And the fact that they've done this twice before, they had to basically prove themselves twice. I think that they have shown themselves very worthy. And they've shown extremely good games consistently throughout this entire process. So I think they're one of the better teams in this knockout stage. And just as a final bullet, they did play in the 2017 AIC, just to show that they're a pretty experienced team. They've been here, done that. Finally, we have Team Allegiance from North America. We all know them. They AWC North American Reps, the same team that finished 5th through 8th at the AWC. And they are two-time Valor Series champions, obviously, because they qualified for both the AWC and AIC, defeated VVV and Tribe Gaming in the playoffs without losing a game. Now, there have been talks that Allegiance might not have their whole team there. That said, I'm going to go just assume that they are all going to be there, which means that I'm going to be predicting Alpha Red finishes first and Allegiance finishes second. As impressive as Saudar was in their qualifying run, I just can't really put Indonesia over North America quite yet. I'll have to see it to believe it. So Alpha Red, easy first place finish. Allegiance will squeak it out over Saudar Esports and be our second team from Group D to move on to the group stage, or second group stage, whatever you want to call it. Let's move on. All right, now let's talk about the actual group stage, or at least the group stages that are called the group stage. I'm confused myself, don't worry about it. So, the seeded team in Group A is Team Flash. They are the Vietnam's #1 team, obviously. They defeated Swing Phantom in the finals 4-1. They were 13-1 in the regular season, and their one loss was to the last place team, which I assume they just threw their random roster out there. So they're basically undefeated throughout the entire AOG. They've cemented themselves basically as the top team in Vietnam this season. And just to put there, they were third in AOG Spring 2018, just to show that they've been around for a little bit. Team Flash actually got pretty lucky that neither Flash Wolves or Alpha Red were in their group. They get a pretty free pass to the next round unless Nova Esports can upset them. I put the likely other members of their group here in TDC and Nova Esports. Extremely unlikely that India makes it here once again. So in the end, I'm going to go out on a limb, though, and say that even though Team Flash has shown themselves to be really good, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that the new look TDC is going to finish in first out of this group stage, and that Team Flash is going to finish second, and Nova Esports will be eliminated at this stage. Let's go on Group B. Bazaar Gaming, Thailand's #1 team. They are the RPL Season 2 champions. That's how they qualified. They defeated both Alpha Red and ITT Bacon. We talked about how good those teams were. They were third in RPL Season 1, second in RPL Major League 2017, just to show that, again, they've been consistently good for a while. This season, they finally managed to break through the hump and become Thailand's #1 team. And they look extremely good doing it. I believe that they are the heavy favorites in this group. Again, the likely other members of this group are Oh My God from China and Overclockers from Vietnam. But as I mentioned in my knockout stage preview, it's somewhat possible that Team Tamago from Singapore could make it to the stage. And that all said, I believe that Bazaar Gaming, I'm pretty confident they're going to be finishing first, unless obviously Oh My God is a very huge wild card. Maybe they stun everyone, but Thailand already showed themselves better than China, at the AWC, so I think that Bizarre Gaming is going to finish first in this group. And I'm going to just trust the system and trust that, oh my god, makes it out, and they are the second team out of this group, and Overclockers will be eliminated. Let's move on. Group C, AHQ from Korea. Now, AHQ is a Taiwanese organization, but they signed Korea so that Korea could play in the GCS, because in Korea there are no longer any more AOV tournaments. It's only KOG right now, the KRKPL. And AHQ, oh my goodness, do they have a stacked resume. GCS Summer 2018 champions. They defeated J-Team, Flash Wolves, and SMG in the playoffs 3-1, or excuse me, in backwards order 3-1, 3-1, 4-2. And that was extremely impressive. Again, go to my channel to watch those English VODs. And they also are the defending world champions, AWC 2018 champions. Just to show that they've been around for a while. They were at the AIC 2017. They finished 5th through 8th. They lost to some Chinese team, and at the time they were Team Olympus. But yeah, AHQ's been around a while. They're really, really good. They're probably one of the one of the favorites at this tournament, if not the favorites. And yeah, AHQ. Likely other members, like I mentioned, Flash Wolves from Taiwan. I screwed up with parentheses there, should be Taiwan number 2. And Swing Phantom, which is Vietnam's number 2 team. What was the other team in that group that I forgot about? Hold on one moment. What do we have here? It was, right, Nova Esports from South America. So, unlikely to be Nova Esports from South America, but wouldn't really matter all that much. I mean, even if South America were in this group, I would be picking AHQ first and Flash Wolves second. It is possible that Flash Wolves could be AHQ. Flash Wolves has been pretty up and down, but when they're on, they're really on. And AHQ has used some gimmick strategies in the past, so they could get caught using a gimmick strategy, especially because these are best of 3 matches, all of them. It's possible that Flash Wolves could beat out AHQ, but we're gonna play it safe. Go AHQ number 1, Flash Wolves number 2. All right. Last group, Group D, J-Team, Taiwan's number 1. They were the GCS Summer 2018 finalists, excuse me. And I put 12-2 in the regular season because that's exactly how they got the number 1 seed. Because AHQ from Korea, who was unable to qualify for the AIC via the GCS, they were just kind of chosen, I guess, by being the best team in Korea by far. By burning through the playoffs, that basically meant that all the teams that were actually Taiwanese in the playoffs kind of stood in place because it's a gauntlet style playoffs. So J-Team, they were set in the finals before the playoffs even began, and that's due to the regular season record. So basically, by going 12-2 in the regular season, they cemented themselves as the Taiwan number 1 seed. Now, obviously, we didn't know that was going to happen. We didn't know that HQ was going to go through the playoffs, but it was a possibility, and that's how it turned out. And at the AWC 2018, they finished in 3rd place, losing to Korea in the losers finals. So, again, J-Team and AHQ have their histories. And obviously, because they were at the AWC, that meant that they were the GCS 2018 Spring Champions. And they defeated AIC defending champion SMG in the finals in that tournament. Just one last final shout out to SMG, who it's just sad that the AIC defending champions aren't here. So, likely other members, like I mentioned, is going to be Alpha Red and Allegiance, with the other team being, okay, my memory's going, other team potentially being Saudara. So, this is very interesting. I forgot who I picked, actually. Did I pick Alpha Red to finish first? I don't believe I did. I believe I just went with the system, went with Chalk, because J-Team, every time I doubt J-Team, they end up just proving me wrong and playing very, very well. I didn't think they're going to play very well at the finals of the GCS, but they nearly took out AHQ. They played very well there. One of the games that they accidentally threw. I guess you can't really purposely throw. Well, I guess you could, but that would be cause for alarm. they played very well in the finals there, even though I expected them AHQ to walk all over them. So I'm just going to go with the safe pick. J-Team's going to finish first. Alfred's going to finish second. I don't think that either Allegiance or Sardar, whoever makes it into this part, has any chance getting out of this group. J-Team and Alpha Red are easily going to be first and second place getting out of this group. It's just whoever finishes first and second. All right, so those are my predictions. These are my final predictions at the end. In Group A, I have TDC finishing first over the seeded team in Team Flash. And in Group B, I have Bizarre Gaming finishing first with Oh My God finishing second. In Group C, I have AHQ finishing first with Flash Falls finishing second. And finally, in Group D, I have J-Team finishing first and Alpha Red finishing second. Now, this is very important. Finishing first or second is a really big deal. And here's why. Because, like I mentioned, in the first round of the tournament format, or the tournament stage, which is after this, it's going to be single elimination for one round only. So they're probably going to do some random draw. So for instance, AHQ plays against Oh My God, right? The loser of that is out of the tournament completely. There's no second chance, which is bizarre to me, but I guess they just want to get on with the thing, right? Once you get to the second round of the playoffs stage, then it's going to be double elimination. So getting first in your group is really, really important. So yeah, that's why you can't just beat the crappy team in your group and get out. You have to try to get first, because if you get second, you're likely going to be facing one of these juggernauts here. Now, I did mention that Team Flash got pretty lucky in getting some of the lower teams in their group, and that could allow them to get to that Final Four, because if they finish first, they could go off against one of the weaker teams instead of having to go against something like J-Team or AHQ or Bizarre Gaming. Now, at this point, I'm not sure who's going to be playing against who. I haven't seen these teams play against each other. Once I see them in action against each other in those group stages, we'll have a better idea of who matches up well against who, which regions have gotten better, which teams have gotten better, which teams have prepared better. So it's hard at this stage to predict who will win the tournament, but I will say that AHQ, J-Team, and Bizarre are the favorites, and it's really hard to pick against AHQ. You know what? I'm just going to go out on a limb. We'll just say Bizarre Gaming wins the entire tournament. That's my prediction, Bizarre Gaming. But I'm not very confident in that at all. These are my more confident predictions. I am somewhat confident that this is going to be the top 8. The order notwithstanding. So, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Hopefully these come out right. Bye-bye.